But John raises an interesting point about the behaviour of water and how predictable is the behaviour of water, and does that change over time? And presumably over time the accuracy and relevance of flood mapping does vary, or is that a naive question? Pat?
Over time, the accuracy of flood mapping should improve. Every rain event that occurs is more data for us to work on, and we do have a fairly short period of data that we work on in Australia. I think it's probably in this area of the country it's no more than 100 years. So we have to go to elaborate statistical methods to try and make it a little bit better. So every time we get a rainfall event, it adds to it. But it certainly, whilst it might reduce uncertainty a small amount, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there with regard to what will happen from a certain rainfall event in a certain catchment. And I suppose another thing to add, and this is reinforcing what Paul said previously, when we get floods, the reason we get them is that the watershed is so wet that every drop of rain that hits the ground runs into the rivers. That's one of the key things, and that's why Somerset, it will be full when we get the next flood, because we've soaked up all of the precedent rain, and then we get enough rain and it all just runs off as if it's a concrete pavement out there. And that's the flow of water in a short period of time that results in a flood.
Andrew?
We're actually doing a study on sea level rise and storm surge down the Queensland coastline at present. And the risks of many households and businesses is quite high. They're quite significantly exposed. Actually getting people to change, or getting planning, particularly planning requirements, changed in light of that is at this point almost virtually impossible. It seems to impact on people's lives, how people want to live, what people want to do, and it's like creating a preparedness for something which may not happen, and that's quite difficult to get people to action that, and so creating that type of long-term resilience will in actual fact involve your organisation, I suppose, getting much or asking for government to enhance its capacity to be aware of these events and to make information like that publicly available.
Next question, down the back.
David Henderson. Just going back to the question of drought, we get the same water out of our bathroom taps as we do out of our garden taps. Is there any advantage in getting two sorts of water, very good drinking water and garden washing the car water?
There can be. I mean, there are two ways of doing that. One is rainwater tanks, if you like, actually help achieve that at a local level. There are a few parts of Australia which actually have dual reticulation, where you have two separate pipelines. There are costs associated with that. It's a very difficult system to retrofit, so it really is only viable in new developments where you have the dual system. The experience is mixed. Consumers, by and large, aren't happy with different qualities. They like the same pressure, they like a whole set of other things, although that possibly can be overcome. But there are some risks associated with contamination, with cross-contamination and various other things. But it is dual reticulation is one route. At a local level, tanks hooked to all your outdoor use is clearly the most common and perhaps the most effective. But I don't think we'll see it in the near term, at least in already established communities, because of the horrendous costs of retrofitting.
But going forward, Paul, you mentioned that to date, where it has been trialled, it's been the evidence is mixed. Is that simply a pricing issue?
I'm not sure. The longest experiment I'm aware of is in Rouse Hill in Sydney, where it works. They have a dual reticulation, but what they've had to do is they've had to essentially deliver water at the same quality in terms of pressure and various other things, or very similar to the potable supply, and they've had to treat it so far that at the end of the day you think, well, maybe you're better off simply having a potable reuse scheme which you then mix into your dam so you're getting the same effect. But I don't think there's a single answer. Certainly in some new communities, I think we will see various ways in which water collected as stormwater or as other forms of reused effluent are used outside the house. Taking it into the house, I think, will be a bigger challenge.
Hi, Brad Rogers from the Queensland Competition Authority. Just wanted to ask a couple of questions about, first about Wivenhoe Dam. If you can take the dam level up to 200%, is it possible to make it, instead of just flood mitigation, actual 200% full storage, and then have flood mitigation on top of that? I don't even know if that's possible, but if that was, wouldn't that solve drought and flood in the one hand? And second, wouldn't a drought pricing policy be able to control some of the consumption during a drought rather than telling people what to do in their home?
I'll comment on drought pricing. I think the problem is that the short-run elasticity, the short-run responsiveness to prices is very low. So the result is you need very large increases. There are a bunch of difficulties with that. One, which regulators will be well aware of, is if there's a mandate to have something like annual cost recovery, it's very difficult to combine that with short-run marginal cost pricing, which is essentially what's being implied there. So leaving it in a regulated system, I think you run into that difficulty. In a political system, you run into the difficulty that no Premier particularly wants to get up and announce a 10,000% increase in prices in order to achieve a 50% reduction in use. So I think it's very difficult, I think, to think of this as a drought response. I think the case where you can get a bit of mileage out of price response, the ACT did it, is in delaying augmentation. So they had to build a new dam, and they went out and said, look, if we just jack up the price before that, we can delay the dam for a few years. There's long enough time to explain that no one's getting ripped off. That's all. That this really is the best plan for everybody, and that we'll have these high prices. Once we're forced to build the dam, we will have deferred that cost and we'll bring the price down again, but we can all do that better off. But to try and get that right in the context of a drought that might end literally any day, I think is politically impossible to the extent there's political involvement. As I say, it would require a substantial rejigging of regulation in a situation where prices are set by regulation, and huge difficulties, I think, particularly in the context of a partially privatised system, which we're moving towards. Certainly in that context, you'd have ferocious lobbying to declare that we're now in drought conditions and required that 10,000% price increase. Having dealt with that kind of lobbying, it can be quite hard to resist.
Now, I am conscious of the time. Do we have a final question? We do.
Lynette Lane, I've got an accounting practice, but my question goes back to when I went up to lecture at the university in Lae in New Guinea. We were put up in a block of units, just 4 units, that was built over its own 16,000 gallon water cistern, and as each of us turned a tap on, our little generator came on in laundry. So we only ever ran out of, admittedly, Lae gets an awful lot of rain, but we did actually have to cart water one year. Is there not some way we could use more in all these new estates that are being built in tea tree swamps, that they couldn't provide their own water